A stray cat led firefighters into the burning building to save a baby. No one could hear. The wire had been dying for months. Behind the refrigerator in the kitchen of 1214 Macon Street, Bridgeport, Connecticut, a 14-gauge copper line had been rubbing against a nailhead since before the baby was born. Back and forth. Every time the compressor kicked on, a tiny vibration. Every cycle, a little more insulation scraped away. The kind of thing no inspector catches because no inspector moves a fridge that hasn't been pulled out since 2019. Tuesday, February, 2:47 a.m. The copper touched the nail. No spark. That's what people get wrong about electrical fires. There's no dramatic flash. No movie moment. The current found a new path. Through the nail, into the wood framing. And the resistance generated heat. Slow heat. Patient heat. The kind that builds inside a wall where nobody can see it, where nobody can smell it, where the smoke detector in the kitchen has had a dead battery since Thanksgiving, because someone pulled it out when the turkey set it off and never put a new one in. 19 degrees outside. Wind chill pushed it to 6. The house, a 2-story colonial with vinyl siding the color of old teeth and a porch that leaned 2 degrees to the left, sat buttoned up tight. Every window locked. Every door sealed against the cold. A perfect box. And inside that box, the air was slowly turning to poison. The Mercer family was asleep, all 4 of them. Kevin and Sarah on the 2nd floor, in the bedroom at the end of the hall. Kevin had gotten home at 2:40 from a warehouse shift off I-95, loading trucks, scanning packages until his wrists went numb. He'd eaten leftover mac and cheese standing over the sink, kissed his wife's forehead without waking her, and was out by 2:55. The kind of sleep that isn't rest. The kind that's closer to shutdown. Sarah hadn't slept well in 7 months. Not since Jack was born. But tonight, she'd taken half a Benadryl for her sinuses. She was deeper under than usual. Down the hall, Kevin's mother, Donna, 67, bad hip, a woman who snored like a diesel engine and slept like she'd earned it, was in the twin bed she'd occupied since her hip replacement in October. She was supposed to stay 2 weeks. That was 4 months ago. Nobody had asked her to leave. Nobody would. And on the 1st floor in the back room off the kitchen, the room that used to be a dining room before they converted it because the stairs were too much for Donna, and then Donna moved upstairs anyway, and the room became the baby's. Jack Mercer slept in a second-hand crib with a mattress that was too firm, and a mobile of plastic stars that hadn't played music since December. 7 months old, 11 pounds, 4 ounces at his last checkup. A quiet baby. The kind that doesn't scream. Just gurgles, whimpers, makes sounds that barely carry through a closed door. The door to his room was shut. Sarah always shut it. She'd read somewhere that a closed door buys time in a fire. Remember that door. By 3:38, the first smoke curled out from behind the refrigerator. Thin, gray, almost invisible. It crept along the ceiling, pooled in corners, slid down the hallway, found the gaps under doors. Warm air pulled it up the stairwell like a chimney in reverse. Carbon monoxide. Odorless. It binds to hemoglobin 200 times more efficiently than oxygen. You don't cough. You don't choke. You just stop waking up. Donna's snoring cut off at 4:05. Not gradually, just gone, like someone hit mute. Kevin went next. Then Sarah. The Benadryl held her under while the CO did its work. Her mother's instinct, the one that should have dragged her out of sleep at the first wrong smell, was chemically silenced. A pink pill and a stuffed nose. By 4:20 a.m., every person on the 2nd floor was unconscious. Not sleeping. Unconscious. The difference is medical. Downstairs, behind that closed door, Jack breathed. The seal wasn't perfect. Smoke was seeping in. A thin line along the bottom edge. But the concentration was a fraction of what filled the hallway. The door had created a pocket. A bubble. Survivable air in a house that was becoming a gas chamber. He shifted in his crib, his fists clenched and unclenched. Something in his body registering wrong. But he didn't cry. He almost never cried. The kitchen wall pulsed orange behind the drywall. The linoleum near the stove was melting, bubbling, warping, releasing that sharp chemical bite of burning vinyl. And outside, in the frozen dark of Macon Street, a pair of eyes caught the first glow in the kitchen window. Not human eyes. Green, steady, unblinking. Frank Oliveira couldn't sleep either. He'd been standing at his kitchen window at 1218 Macon Street, 2 doors down, heating milk in a saucepan because his doctor told him warm milk helps with insomnia, and his doctor was a liar. 63 years old, retired from the Bridgeport School District, Bad knees, worse prostate. The kind of man who's up at 4 a.m. because his body has decided sleep is optional. He saw the glow first, then the smoke, gray against black sky, lit from beneath by something orange that had no business being in a kitchen window at this hour. He watched it for maybe 5 seconds. His brain did that thing brains do, tried to make it normal. A light left on, a TV, somebody cooking late, then the glass cracked. Sharp and clean, carrying across the frozen yards like a rifle shot. The kitchen window of 1214 split corner to corner, and smoke poured through the gap like it had been waiting for permission. Frank called 911 at 4:23 a.m., gave the address twice, said the word fire 3 times, said he didn't see anyone outside. The dispatcher told him to stay put. He didn't. Put on boots over bare feet, grabbed the flashlight from the junk drawer, walked outside into 6-degree air wearing pajama pants and a coat he didn't zip. He crossed both yards and stood on the Mercers' front walkway shouting their names. Kevin, Sarah. No answer. He pounded on the front door. The wood was warm under his knuckles. He didn't go in. He wanted to. You could see it in the way his hand stayed on the door. But the smoke was pushing through the seams of the frame, and Frank had spent 40 years working with kids. He knew what he didn't know. Engine 7 out of Bridgeport Fire Station 9 rolled onto Macon Street at 4:29. 6 minutes from dispatch. Lieutenant Danny Reeves was riding officer, 14 years on the job, a wiry guy with a jaw like a 2x4 and hands that were permanently dry from chemical exposure. Behind him, 3 firefighters in full turnout gear, air tanks already on their backs. The house was glowing from the inside. Not flames through windows. Not yet. That deep orange pulse behind the smoke, like the whole first floor was running a fever. Smoke pushed from every seam. The eaves. The window frames. The gap under the front door where Frank was still standing. Flashlight aimed at nothing. "Sir, I need you back." Reeves didn't shout. Never did. He had a voice like a hand on your shoulder. Firm, close. Impossible to argue with. They forced the front door at 4:31. The smoke hit like a wall. Black. Dense. The kind that eats your visibility at arm's length. Thermal cameras up. The screen showed the first floor as a wash of orange and red. The stairwell pulling heat upward like a chimney. Reeves sent 2 men up, Rivera and Kowalski. Donna first. On the floor next to her bed. She'd rolled off at some point. Maybe a seizure. Maybe her body's last attempt to find breathable air. Limp. Gray-faced. Pulse weak, but there. Rivera got her over his shoulder in a carry that bent his knees and made his back scream through 3 layers of gear. Kevin next. Face down in the hallway, 6 feet from the bedroom door. He'd woken up. Partially. Enough to get out of bed, make it to the hall. Not enough to make it further. His fingers were dug into the carpet fibers like he'd been dragging himself. Kowalski grabbed him under the arms and pulled. Sarah was the hardest. Still in bed. Still under the covers. The Benadryl and the carbon monoxide had kept her exactly where she was. When Rivera lifted her, her head rolled back and her arm hung loose, and for one bad second he thought she was gone. Then she made a sound. A wet, gurgling exhale that meant her lungs were still in the fight. 3 bodies. Out the front door. Onto the frozen lawn. Oxygen masks on. Donna came around first. Coughing. Retching. Her eyes rolling white before locking onto the flashing lights. Kevin was next. Sat up so fast Rivera had to push him back down. He was saying something. Repeating it. One word. Over and over through the mask and the coughing and the confusion. Sarah was last. She opened her eyes and grabbed the nearest arm, Reeves's, with a grip that surprised him. Her mouth was moving, trying to form something, her lips making shapes that wouldn't become sound. Reeves leaned close. "Ma'am, you're safe. You're outside. Is anyone else in the house?" Kevin was still saying that word. "Jack." Then Sarah found her voice. Broken. Half breath, half sound. But the shape was clear. "My baby." Reeves looked at the house. The first floor windows were solid orange now. He looked at Kevin. "Where? Where's the baby?" Kevin pointed at the house, then at Sarah, then at the house again. His face, soot-streaked, oxygen-starved, terrified, couldn't hold a thought long enough to finish it. I thought he was with..." Sarah shook her head, hard. She didn't know. The CO had stolen 30 minutes of her memory, and she was clawing through the gaps like someone searching a dark room for a switch that isn't there. Donna was crying, saying Kevin's name between sobs that sounded like choking. 3 adults. All alive. None of them sure where the baby was. Reeves keyed his radio. Command Engine 7. 3 victims out conscious. Reports of a possible 4th, infant. Unconfirmed location. 1st floor fully involved. I need a second company now. He looked at the house again. Both kitchen windows blew simultaneously, and a tongue of flame licked the eaves before sucking back inside. The sound was like a giant taking a breath. The thermal camera operator swept the 1st floor from outside. The screen was a mess. 600 degrees of ambient heat turning everything the same shade of white. No distinct body signatures. No cold spots. No contrast. If there was a baby in there, the camera couldn't find him. The operation was 6 minutes from being called off, and somewhere behind the house something started screaming. Not a human sound. Higher, sharper, relentless. A sound nobody was listening for. The cat was standing at the side door, not pacing, not hiding, planted, 4 paws on the concrete stoop, back arched, mouth wide open, screaming at a door that was cracked 2 inches where the crew had forced it 20 minutes ago. The sound coming out of her wasn't a meow, it was a wail, high-pitched, guttural, repeating every 3 seconds with a rhythm that had nothing to do with hunger or cold or territory. It was the sound an animal makes when something is wrong and nobody's paying attention. Firefighter James Purcell heard it first. He'd been pulling hose line along the east side of the house when the sound cut through the diesel engine noise and the radio static and the wind. He stopped, tilted his head, his mask fogged, and he wiped it with a glove already black with soot. A cat, screaming at a door. He almost kept walking. Almost. That word would keep him awake for years. Hey, he keyed his shoulder mic. There's a cat back here losing its mind at the side entry. Reeves came back flat. Copy, ignore it. We're wrapping primary search. Purcell took 2 steps toward the engine. The cat hit a pitch that vibrated in his back teeth. He turned around. The animal looked at him. Not the way cats look at people. Sideways, half interested through you. This was direct. Green eyes locked on his face shield, pupils blown wide in the red and blue strobe light. She held it for 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then she went through the door. 7 pounds of gray tabby slipped through the 2-inch gap and disappeared into smoke so black it looked solid. No hesitation, no pause at the threshold. Just gone. I don't know why he followed her. He told me later he didn't know either. Said his legs moved before his brain caught up. Said there was something in the way she looked at him. Not begging, not panicked. Something closer to a command. Like she was telling him, not asking. He keyed the mic again. Purcell entering side door, following an animal. Something's off in here. Reeves. Purcell, negative, pull back. Floor is compromised. He was already inside. The hallway was 0 visibility. Not dark, black. The kind where your own hand vanishes 6 inches from your face. His flashlight cut a yellow cone through smoke thick enough to chew. The heat found his neck first. That gap between the helmet and the collar where the gear doesn't seal. 200 degrees. Maybe worse. Sweat ran into his eyes and he blinked hard because wiping his face meant lifting the mask, and lifting the mask meant not walking out. The floor was soft. Vinyl over plywood, and the plywood was cooking from below. Each step had a spongy give that made his gut clench, like walking on a surface that's deciding whether to hold you or swallow you. He couldn't see the cat, couldn't hear her over the fire chewing through the kitchen wall to his left, but he could see the hallway, 15 feet, straight shot, ending at a door. A closed door. He moved, fast but measured, testing the floor with his toe before dropping his full weight. The walls were peeling on both sides, wallpaper curling off drywall that was cracking and popping like knuckles. The ceiling banked smoke in layers so dense the top 2 feet of the hallway had turned into a rolling black river. 12 feet. The kitchen wall groaned. Deep. Structural. The sound studs make when they're about to let go. When that wall dropped, the ceiling would follow, and everything between him and the front of the house would become a pile. 8 feet. His boot hit something soft. He looked down. The cat. Pressed flat against the base of the closed door, paws tucked, ears pinned back. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was making a different sound. Low. Continuous. A vibrating trill aimed at the gap under the door. Like she was talking to something on the other side. Purcell dropped to one knee. His knee pad hissed against the hot vinyl. He grabbed the handle, metal, hot through his glove, turned it, pushed. The room was different. The air was different. Not clean. Nothing in this house was clean anymore. But thinner, lighter. The smoke sat at ceiling height instead of filling the space top to bottom. The closed door had held. Not perfectly, but enough. His flashlight swept the room. A dresser. A lamp knocked on the floor. Cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. And in the corner, a crib. 3 steps. He looked over the rail. The baby was on his back. Eyes closed. Skin the color of wet concrete. Lips parted. Still. Purcell pulled off his right glove with his teeth, pressed 2 fingers against the baby's chest, held his breath. Nothing. Then, faint, uneven, fluttering against his fingertips like a moth trapped under paper. A heartbeat. I got him. His voice broke on the radio and he didn't give a damn. I got the baby. Back room, 1st floor. He's alive. Barely. I need medics at the side door right now. He scooped Jack out of the crib with one arm. The baby weighed nothing. 11 pounds wrapped in a cotton onesie that smelled like smoke and formula and something sour underneath. The smell of a small body running out of options. His head rolled against Purcell's forearm. His fingers were blue at the tips. The cat was at the door already, waiting. Behind them, the kitchen wall gave up. The sound was a tree falling inside a drum. A deep crack. Then the roar of fire finding fresh air. The hallway ceiling buckled. Drywall and insulation came down in burning sheets that hit the floor and kept burning. The way in was gone. Purcell looked at the side door, 15 feet through a corridor that was now half collapsed and fully lit up. He looked at Jack, pressed against his chest plate. He looked at the cat, who was already moving, low, fast, threading through gaps in the debris like she'd memorized the path. He followed her. Again. 12 seconds. That's all it took, and that's all he had. Boots on floor that was breaking apart under him. Ceiling raining chunks of fire. The baby held tight against his chest with one arm, the other shielding his mask from falling debris. The cat 3 feet ahead, a gray smear against orange light, picking a line through wreckage that shouldn't have had a line to pick. He hit the side door with his shoulder. The cold air cracked across his face like a slap. He went down the concrete steps, dropped to one knee on the frozen grass, and held Jack up to the floodlights and the shouting and the spinning red and blue. Jack coughed. One cough. Weak. Wet. Small enough to fit in your palm. The most important sound on Macon Street that year. The paramedics were already running. The ambulance doors closed at 4:41 a.m. Jack was on a pediatric backboard no bigger than a cutting board. Infant oxygen mask over his nose and mouth. Pulse oximeter clipped to his toe because his fingers were too small and too blue for a read. The number on the screen said 74. Should have said 98. The paramedic, a woman named Diane Chen, 9 years on the job, 2 kids of her own sleeping at home right now, didn't comment on the number. She just opened the oxygen valve wider and started an IV in the baby's scalp, because the veins in his arms had collapsed. If you've never seen an IV placed in a baby's head, I hope you never do. The needle goes into the superficial temporal vein, just above the ear, where the skin is thin enough to see through. Diane's hands were steady. Her jaw was clenched so tight the muscles in her neck were cording. Sarah rode in the back. She couldn't hold Jack. He was strapped, wired, being kept alive by a machine and a stranger, so she gripped the edge of the backboard with both hands and said his name, over and over, like the word itself could keep him breathing. Kevin rode up front, didn't speak, sat with his palms up on his knees staring at the soot ground into the lines of his hands. He told me later that the fire wasn't what broke him. It was the gap, the 40 minutes between falling asleep and the carbon monoxide taking him under, 40 minutes when his son was alone on the 1st floor, and he was unconscious 20 feet above, breathing poison, dreaming about nothing. He'd carried Jack to that crib himself, 6 hours earlier, fed him, changed him, turned on the mobile that didn't play music, whispered, "Night, buddy," against his forehead, then closed the door, the same door that saved his son's life, the same door that nearly killed him because no one knew he was behind it. Jack's oxygen levels wouldn't hold. They'd climb to 81, drop to 76, crawl to 83, crash to 71. Diane adjusted the flow 3 times, suctioned his airway twice. Gray mucus the color of wet cement, thick with particulate that had no business inside a 7-month-old's lungs. They pulled into Bridgeport Hospital's ER bay at 4:58. The team was already lined up. A pediatric intensivist named Dr. Karen Lowe, who'd been called from home, 2 respiratory therapists, a NICU nurse named Reggie who was supposed to clock out 20 minutes ago, but stayed when the page came through. They took Jack through the double doors and Sarah couldn't follow. A nurse held her arm. Not rough, just enough. Sarah sat in a plastic chair in the hallway, and folded over her own knees and cried the way people cry when sound isn't big enough for what they're carrying. No words, just air leaving her body and pulses that shook her shoulders and didn't stop. Donna arrived by separate ambulance, stable but scrambled. The CO had chewed holes in her short-term memory. She kept asking where she was, why everything smelled like smoke. Was it Tuesday? They put her on a gurney with oxygen and a heated blanket, and she was out in 2 minutes flat. Her body had quit arguing. Kevin found Sarah at 5:14. He'd walked from triage in a hospital gown that didn't close in the back, trailing an IV pole, feet bare on cold linoleum. Sat next to her, put his arm around her. She leaned into him and they held each other in a fluorescent hallway that smelled like iodine and floor wax, while their son fought for air 30 feet away behind a door they couldn't open. Dr. Lowe came out at 6:22. She was direct. The kind of direct you're grateful for when your brain can't process anything soft. Jack had severe carbon monoxide poisoning. Carboxyhemoglobin at 31%. Above 25 is critical in infants. High-flow oxygen therapy. Vitals stabilizing. Saturation at 89 and climbing. He'd moved his hands, opened his eyes once. He's alive because someone got to him when they did, she said. 5 more minutes and we'd be having a different conversation. 5 minutes. That's what the closed door bought. That's what the cat bought. That's what Purcell bought when he ignored a direct order and followed 7 pounds of stray into a burning hallway. At 7:15 a.m., in the pediatric ICU, Jack Mercer opened his eyes, looked at his mother's face, and reached for her finger. Sarah made a sound I won't try to describe, past crying, below language, the sound of a woman who'd been holding herself together with nothing but grip strength and adrenaline finally breaking because the thing she was holding on to had come back. Kevin stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, jaw locked, eyes wet, breathing through his nose in short, controlled pulls that fooled nobody. Nobody mentioned the cat. Not yet. Too many machines beeping, too many forms, too many questions that needed answers nobody had. But later that night, sitting in a vinyl chair next to Jack's crib in the ICU, Kevin asked the one question that wouldn't leave him alone. Who was that cat? 3 days in the ICU. That's what it took. Jack's carboxyhemoglobin dropped to 9% by Wednesday afternoon. His oxygen saturation held steady at 96 by Thursday morning. He was eating again, not well, not eagerly, but the bottle wasn't being refused anymore. Doctor, Lowe used the word remarkable once and then corrected herself, said lucky instead, then paused, said she wasn't sure either word was right. Kevin barely left the hospital, slept in the vinyl chair, ate vending machine sandwiches wrapped in plastic that crinkled too loud in the quiet of the NICU. Sarah went home once to get clothes, diapers, the stuffed rabbit Jack liked to hold when he slept. She stood in the driveway for 4 minutes staring at the house before going inside. The front door was boarded. The kitchen was gone. The hallway where Purcell had walked was a black tunnel of charred framing and melted wire. The smell hit her before she crossed the threshold. Wet ash, burnt plastic, that chemical tang that sticks to your sinuses for days. She got what she needed. Didn't look at the back room. Couldn't. Donna was discharged on Wednesday. Her memory was coming back in patches. She remembered the smoke alarm that never went off. Remembered waking up on frozen grass with a stranger pressing a mask to her face. Remembered the cold. She didn't remember falling out of bed. Didn't remember the hallway. The CO had taken those minutes and she wasn't getting them back. On Friday, Kevin called the fire station. He got Reeves first. Reeves told him what he knew. The timeline, the entry, the search, the 3-body recovery. Then he transferred the call to Purcell. Purcell was quiet for a long time. Kevin could hear him breathing on the other end, the sound of a man deciding how much to say. The cat was at the side door, Purcell said, screaming. I was walking away and I don't know how to explain this. She looked at me, not like a cat looks, like a person who needs you to understand something and you're the last one who might. Kevin asked if the cat went in first. She went in like she knew where she was going, straight line, no wandering. She went to that door and she sat there and she made a sound I've never heard a cat make, like she was calling to him. Kevin asked how long he'd been a firefighter. 16 years. Kevin asked if he'd ever seen anything like that. The line was quiet again. Then, no, and I've been in a lot of houses. If you're still with me, drop a comment, because I need to know. Have you ever seen an animal do something that you couldn't explain? Something that made you rethink what they understand? Tell me. I read every one. Kevin started asking around the neighborhood. Frank next door had seen the cat before. Gray tabby, notched ear, skinny. She'd been around for at least a year, maybe 2. Lived under the porch of a vacant house 4 doors down. Ate from tipped trash cans on collection night. Kept to herself. A woman across the street, Rita Dominguez, lived at 1221, said the cat used to sit on her back steps some mornings. She'd put out a saucer of milk once. The cat drank it, then left. Never came inside. Never let Rita touch her. She wasn't friendly, Rita said. Wasn't mean either. She was just, there. Like she belonged to the street. Not to anybody on it. Nobody had named her. Nobody had fed her regularly. Nobody had taken her to a vet, or wondered where she slept when the temperature dropped below 0 or what she ate when the trash cans were empty. She was a ghost. Had been for as long as anyone could remember. But she knew that house. She knew the baby was in that room. She knew the door was closed and the smoke was coming and nobody was listening. How? I don't have an answer. I've turned it over 100 times. Cats have a sense of smell 14 times stronger than ours. They can hear frequencies we can't detect. They sense heat through their whiskers. Maybe she heard the baby's breathing through the door. Maybe she smelled something. Skin, milk, the particular scent of an infant that registers differently than an adult. Or maybe it was something else, something that doesn't fit on a chart. Kevin didn't care about the science. He cared about one thing. She was still out there. Jack came home on a Monday. Not to 1214. That house was gutted, boarded, waiting for an insurance adjuster who wouldn't show up for another 2 weeks. Kevin's brother had a rental in Fairfield, 20 minutes north. Small, clean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that smelled like pine sol and someone else's cooking. It was enough. They spent the first week doing the things you do when your life burns down and you're still standing. Paperwork, phone calls, donated clothes from the church on Brooklawn Avenue, a car seat from Sarah's sister, diapers from a neighbor they'd never spoken to before who left 2 boxes on the porch without knocking. Jack was different, not damaged. Dr. Lowe had been clear about that. His follow-up scans were clean, lungs recovering, oxygen levels normal, but he was louder now. He cried when he hadn't before, fussed at night, reached for Sarah every time she set him down, his fingers gripping her shirt with a strength that didn't match his size. She didn't mind. She held on just as tight. Kevin drove back to Macon Street on a Thursday, told Sarah he needed to check the house, see what the insurance company had flagged. That was half true. He parked across the street, left the engine running. The house looked worse than he remembered. The vinyl siding above the kitchen was melted and black, warped into shapes that didn't look like anything man-made. The front windows were gone. Blue tarps covered the roof where the ventilation holes had been cut. Yellow tape across the porch. He sat there for 10 minutes, didn't get out. He was about to pull away when he saw her, on the sidewalk, directly in front of the house, sitting the way cats sit when they're not going anywhere. Upright, paws together, tail wrapped around her feet. Gray tabby, notched left ear, thinner than before, if that was possible. Her coat was rough and dull, and there was a new scratch across her nose that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. She was looking at the house. Not at him. At the house. Like she was waiting for something that was supposed to come out and hadn't. Kevin turned off the engine. He got out. Closed the door quietly. The kind of quiet you use around something you don't want to scare. Crossed the street. Stopped about 6 feet from her. She turned her head. Green eyes. Same eyes that had locked onto Purcell's face shield in the strobe light. Same eyes that had stared down a hallway full of smoke and decided to walk into it anyway. She didn't run, didn't arch, didn't hiss. Kevin crouched, extended his hand, palm down, fingers loose. The way you offer yourself to something that has no reason to trust you. She sniffed his knuckles. Her whiskers brushed his skin. Dry, light, barely there. Then she stood up, walked forward, and pressed the side of her head against his palm. Kevin picked her up. She weighed nothing. 7 pounds of bone and hunger and whatever it is that makes a living thing run into a burning building for someone it's never met. He put her in the passenger seat. She sat there, didn't fight, didn't look back at the house. Sarah was standing on the porch of the rental when he pulled in. She saw the cat through the windshield and her hand went to her mouth. Kevin got out, walked around, opened the passenger door. The cat stepped onto the driveway, looked up at Sarah, and sat down. Sarah knelt, picked her up with both hands, held her the way she held Jack, close, careful, like something that could disappear if she let go. She was waiting, Kevin said. Sarah didn't answer. She carried the cat inside and closed the door. They named her Ember. If this story hit you somewhere real, subscribe. I tell stories like this every week. Animals that show up when no one else does. Drop a comment. What would you have named her?